Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, my focus is the new moon in Scorpio on the 4th of November. Well, the 5th of November, it depends really where you are in the world. And of course, the background against which that new moon is taking place, which is really quite impressive on this occasion. So I'll waste no time, I'll get straight in there. And let's have a look at this new moon in Scorpio. Now, if you've seen some of my other new moon videos recently, since August, all the new moons have been angling Uranus in different ways. They've been square it, they've been inconjunct it, and now we're seeing this new moon opposition Uranus. It's completely opposite in the zodiac and probably the most powerful of all. But if we cast our minds back to October the 6th and the new moon in Libra, that new moon was not only conjunct Mars, but also inconjunct or quincunx Uranus. And if you remember, that was a really, really powerful time. And we think sometimes of the Uranus having to do with the internet, having to do with electricity and power surges and power blackouts, things like that. And October the 6th was really, Facebook had one of its, it went out for 6 hours, which included Instagram, as well as WhatsApp. So it was a major, major event. And of course, it went out again a little bit later on in the week. And that was a time of revelation as well, of extraordinary and unexpected events. There were announcements, trouble with fuel in England, and understanding that gas prices so high is going to make a huge difference, not just to our kind of bills, but also to companies, manufacturers who simply can't afford to keep open. So that was really a week of revelation, and that was just the quincunx. So you can imagine, as we get nearer the 4th of October and we get that new moon in opposition to Uranus, my goodness, are the sparks going to fly? And what's interesting, the 5th of November, 4th, 5th, is bonfire night. In England, it's Guy Fawkes, and we celebrate with fireworks and bonfires. And it's also a festival in India as well, which is the great and beloved goddess. And again, fireworks, lights, the festival of light. So it is quite interesting at this period. Not only do we have these festivals that celebrate all sorts of fiery, lightful things, but we have an exact rendition of that really in the astrology. So let's take a look, first of all, at what the new moon looks like in terms of the other planets in the horoscope. So as you can see here, if you look towards the bottom of the chart in the kind of almost, 5 o'clock position, 5, 6 o'clock, you'll see there the sun, the moon, and Mars is also creeping up on the sun and moon. We've still got that configuration going for us. Now, the sun and moon are always together in a new moon, and that's why we can't actually see the new moon in the night sky. We only start to see it when the little sickle shape starts to emerge. And then we say, oh, that's a new moon. But it's probably a couple of days after the new moon when we see it. But as you'll see, if you look at the numbers, we can see that Uranus up there is at 1247. And here we have the sun and moon also at 12 degrees of Scorpio. So it is a very, very close opposition to Uranus. And the closer an aspect is, the more kind of dynamic it is. So we do have a sense of, fieriness and explosion and shocks and revelations and upsets, and maybe even a few more events linked to technology with unexpected cuts and blanks and blackouts. Again, this is a feature of Uranus I see all the time. And of course, too, a little bit more with the full moon, but the new moon is in there as well. And we look at eclipses, which are either solar eclipses, new moon eclipses, or full moon eclipses, lunar eclipses. When they're linked to Uranus, we get a lot of Earth movements. The Earth moves when we have the new moon or the full moon connected to Uranus. And we can take that as a metaphor in that things happen that really do pull the rug out from underneath our feet. The Earth moves because we've had a most exciting and extraordinary awakening. And the Earth can move because the tectonic plates have rubbed together and caused an eruption of some description. Now, what you will also see from this horoscope is that the red lines that link Uranus to both the sun and the moon and also to Mars also have angles to the planet Saturn, which is in the 3 o'clock position of your horoscope. So what we're seeing here is the Saturn-Uranus square, which we've been living under really since the end of last year. And we're going to be living with it through next year as well. So we might as well start really taking it on board and understanding it. So this new moon is also bringing out the qualities of that Saturn-Uranus square, which we've seen in so many forms over these past, nearly 12 months. And we've seen it in the sense of lockdown, getting in the way of our freedoms because of the coronavirus. We've also seen breakthroughs in technology, extraordinary breakthroughs. We've also seen people going into space as though they were just taking a trip to Las Vegas and back. So there's been a lot of technology that has amounted to very good things and breakthroughs, as well as having an enormous amount of disruption to our lives. And of course, with Saturn, which often represents things to do with the rules of life, governments, things that place restrictions on us anyway, laws, law and order, we've seen a lot of disruption and upsets, whether they're protests about what's gone on in the world, in every country and for different reasons, but a lot of them, especially in Australia, linked to the coronavirus and all the lockdowns. So that Saturn-Uranus square is really playing out all across the world in different ways, and of course in our own individual lives as well. So we shall certainly see more of this around the time of that new moon on the 4th and 5th of November. Now, what you can also see if you look at the horoscope, you can see where the sun and moon are, and you can see Mars just behind it. And Mars is caught up in that T-square, a square to Saturn, an opposition to Uranus. And Mercury is close behind. And what that means is on the 30th of October, the sun squared Saturn. So that's just prior to that new moon. And both Mercury and Mars will also square Saturn as we get to the 10th of November. So we are really in a period where there's a lot of activity. On the one hand, big angles to Saturn, which means, hey, we've got to look at reality. We've got to deal with the reality of things, not the maybes and the might be's, but the reality. And we're also looking at Uranus playing in there, which means shocks, surprises, upsets, and all the things that I've just been talking about. Now, I want to come away a little bit from that as well, because I want to talk about what the moon in Scorpio is as well. You know, Scorpio has a bit of a fearsome reputation in astrology. We fear the sign because it's so powerful, it's so secretive and mysterious. So you put the moon in that sign, and the moon representing our emotions, our feelings, our instincts, and especially if we're women, I think it's our inner woman. And in a man, of course, it's his inner female, and we have male and female sides of ourselves. So the moon is still representing feminine things. And so a moon in Scorpio is very intense, passionate, highly committed kind of moon. Moon in Scorpio people aren't black and, well, they are black and white. They're not so halfway, medium kind of things. They're really all in or they're all out. And you do get a lot of Moon in Scorpio people who really love research. They go into things like medical research, psychology, astrology, things that require lifting the surface of things and getting right to the core of it. But yes, it can be a vengeful sign too, because remember, if you've put your whole self into something, you've trusted someone completely, you adore that person, you want to do that thing, so much of yourself is invested in a situation. My goodness, when it doesn't work out, when it betrays you, when something happens that really got in the way of all your passions and hard work and all the rest of it, then the response to that can be extreme. And I always say that while a Moon in Scorpio person is still shouting and screaming and frothing at the mouth, it's okay. It's when a Moon in Scorpio person goes quiet, because it means all that fire has turned to ice. So let's have a look at what it might mean, generally speaking, for the zodiac. Well, the description I've just given you about a Moon in Scorpio tells you the nature of the times, that people are going to be very intense about things. And we're going to see things happening that mean that people feel so powerfully about what they're involved with or who they're involved with. There are going to be some very profound statements made. But it does mean things can be very unreasonable at the time of this full moon. And there isn't going to be any nice halfway, half-baked solutions to anything. It's going to be all or nothing, very, very extreme. And we need to remember as well that on the new moon, 4th, 5th of November, we're also 2 weeks away from a lunar eclipse. And lunar eclipses have quite an elastic timeline. And we may be looking at the 19th of November for that lunar eclipse, but its effects will come in way before that. So I think what might be interesting, and you can apply to your own lives, is whatever's happening to you around the time of that new moon, there is something going to fulfill itself around the time of that lunar eclipse, because it's a little tiny bit of a sandwich. And of course, likewise, when we come to we've got the new moon in Scorpio, there's going to be a full moon in Scorpio in 6 months' time. So that's going to take us to the May period. And so you've got a 6-month period in which things can really develop if you begin them anew at the new moon. And I often talk about this, because it's such an obvious cycle. And, in astrology, there's a lot of fudgy things. Some things don't always work, and they take a lot of manipulation to get them to work. But this new moon, full moon cycle, the new moon in a sign, and then the full moon in the same sign, really does have an effect. And so often we can look back and see what we began, what happened around that time, and what now we're seeing as a result of all of that. And it's another way really of letting astrology guide our lives without letting it rule our lives. And that really is a very different thing. And I notice sometimes in my comments column, and I love your comments, by the way, please keep commenting. But I notice that there's often a comment about the fact that, a certain full moon or new moon means specific things, and exactly what does, can I set my financial store by it? Will I only get money once the full moon occurs in 6 months' time? And I think that's very, very difficult to do, really, because we're all individuals. We have natal charts that are completely different. The cycle will play in together, new moon, full moon in 6 months, but there are varying degrees of what that 6-month cycle may mean. So let me have a look too at the idea of the sort of individual places for this new moon in Scorpio. We've all got Scorpio in our charts somewhere. And when we have a new moon in this sign, not only do we get a flavor of what that moon in Scorpio is, but more to the point, what it means to us, and how it reacts with us. What is our moon in Scorpio like when it's going through the house of Scorpio? And you'll know from the events around the 4th and 5th of November, what happens, your instinctive reactions to things, the areas of life that at that time are causing those emotional reactions. That tells you a lot about what the Scorpio factor in your life is all about. But if we look at it again from a very general sort of point, if you're an Aries, then that moon in Scorpio takes place in your 8th house. So we're in the area of financial and emotional exchange. So a new moon could mean new agreements, new developments, a new sexual relationship. It can mean a new start financially, or some kind of partnership where money is part of the issue. And so you get to put in the rules of engagement, so to speak. But remember, it's opposed to Uranus. So such things may come about very unexpectedly. And of course, at the same time, what Uranus may do is upset existing emotional, sexual, and financial relationships. When we look at Taurus, we're looking at relationships per se. So the new moon there suggests there is a new cycle beginning, which is a good thing. If we use my heads up as a kind of plan by which we're more aware of what's happening on a day-to-day or a week-by-week basis, we can adjust our lives and sort of understand what's going on. And when we think about a new moon in the 7th house, we think this is a new cycle for relationships. And it might be good to consciously start some new kind of routines and some ways of putting some fresh air in your relationships, especially if you're married or you're in a long-term relationship. But it can also be the same for a working relationship. This new moon means new beginnings. And of course, sometimes they come about just by themselves. So there's a new contract, or there's a new relationship, or a very new and important stage, like engagement or marriage, for instance, for an existing relationship. And that's for Taurians. If we come to Geminis, then we're looking at the 6th house, and we're in the area of systems. Now, I know the traditional way of looking at the 6th house is all about work, and it's all about well-being, and it is. But the idea of systems makes it much clearer, because we all have systems by which we live. We have a day-to-day routine. We get up at a certain time, we have breakfast or we don't have breakfast, we go to work or we don't go to work. But anyway, that's one of the systems that governs our life. It's the pattern that holds us together. So a new moon means, hey, why don't we break a few patterns? Because often we get caught up in what we always do. And that means we've limited ourselves and we don't get to do what we might like to do. Systems are also the health system. So a new moon means it's a great time to take an overall look at how your health is doing, mental health, physical health, dental health, and to get a checkup or to think about new ways to get fitter, healthier, stronger, and better. That new moon allows you to do that. And of course, tied up to Uranus, it may mean you get a bit of a shock, and that says, whoops, I need to do something different here. I've got to pay attention to that. It's an awakening. So if we move on and we come to Cancer, that new moon is in the 5th house. And that's a very creative, sort of self-oriented area of the chart, not in a selfish way, but rather more what you give of yourself in terms of offerings. And we can see that in the sense of what do we give to the world? Well, we can give birth. We can bring new human beings into the world. But we can also bring new endeavors into the world, and we can allow ourselves and the expression of who we innately are. We can star that, we can put it in the spotlight in some way. So yes, we might have a new project on the go, maybe even a new baby, or we may be offered some kind of new situation which will allow us to put our creative energies into it. And once again, add Uranus into the mix, and you've got unexpected, surprising. If we move to Leo, here we are in the 4th house of home, family, and the foundations of life. Now, this reminds me that in November the 22nd, I'm going to be giving a talk about the fourth house, and where I'm going to be taking the fourth house here is into the sense of your ancestors, your past memories, gene memories. And so the fourth house of the horoscope is much more than the idea of your immediate family and the place you live. It's much more powerful. So of course, here we have a new moon, opposition Uranus. So it's a time when something about your past may come to life, or something in the form of an awakening about, where you've come from, your family life, or it could mean a change of home or a change of people who live in your home. On we come to Virgo, and here we have the third house, and a new moon in the third house is about new ideas. It's about new positions. And, we all take positions about things, don't we? We just do. We have opinions. But sometimes we're limited by those opinions. We think, we've subscribed to them for so long that they're part of us, and we don't realize sometimes that they're out of date. We have out of date opinions, and they need to be changed. And this new moon is about changing your position. It might mean traveling. It might mean taking a new course. But what it really amounts to is this new mindset, this new mind space. That's what's offered to Virgo. If we come on to Libra, yes, of course, the new moon is taking place in your next door neighbor sign of Scorpio. So we're in the area of self-worth. If in the 8th house, we share our money, we get something from other people. In the 2nd house, it's self-made. It's what we produce, it's what we build, it's what we create. And of course, our self-worth is something we're in charge of. Yeah, we might feel sometimes, oh, my self-worth is dented because somebody criticized us. But how we go on from there is to do with our own strength of purpose and our sense of who we are, our full value. So yes, the new moon here might indicate an offer or an opportunity to, up your self-worth. That might mean money. Maybe it's more money coming in. Not necessarily. But let's also look at the idea of starting new financial orders. That's important, whether you decide to clear up your financial track record and make it better, or whether you do begin new investments and new jobs, so you've got new income. We come on to the next sign, Scorpio. Well, of course, we know, we've talked about what that means. The moon is Scorpio. So for you, Scorpio, a new moon is a time of new personal beginnings. It's a kind of image change in some cases, but certainly a kind of, you want a new look. And sometimes that manifests literally. You change your hair color, you get a new outfit, you think, oh, I'm a bit stale, I want to be different. And so that new moon kind of inspires you to do new things about your personal life. And of course, that can flow into your relationship life and your friendships as well, because lots of things can get an injection of, fresh air, the new, the different on that new moon. And of course, you'll be starting that new cycle that in 6 months' time, you'll be able to see where you got. And especially important if you begin a new relationship at this time. If we go on to Sagittarius, the new moon is in the 12th house, and that's a very mysterious area. I call it the house of shadows. It's because you don't really see things clearly, but in reflection, shadows, not quite the real thing. But it's a powerful time too, because new thoughts and new possibilities are beginning to seed themselves. And it's very, very important while the sun is moving through your 12th house, which it is, and it will come out when the sun enters your sign around the 21st, 22nd, I can't remember exactly when it is, of November. And then you'll be in the sunshine, so to speak. But now is the time for more rest, more withdrawal, more time for the unconscious mind to do some housekeeping and also to see the ideas. So that new moon is very important for the new ideas and possibilities that are taking root in your life. If we come on to Capricorn, the 11th house, the 11th house of group consciousness. It's where we collaborate with others. It's where we think of ourselves in relation to not just other people, but other peoples. So we're thinking about nations, communities, and groups. So it's a great time to join a community, to join some kind of new group, to start a new collaboration, to realize, especially if you have been a little on your own, or you've been, beavering away at a kind of project of your own, to really start sharing those ideas and possibilities with other people, like-minded spirits, kindred spirits. This is the theme of the new moon: new endeavors, new collaborations, new ways of working with other people. So we move on from Capricorn and we come to Aquarius. And for Aquarius, this new moon is taking place in the 10th house, the area of life direction. If the 4th house was where we've come from, our home, our family, our ancestors, our background, the foundations of the future, then the 10th house is what we've done with all that. We're out in the world. We've got a position in society. We've got status. We may have a job description title. That's all 10th house stuff. So a new moon says there's something new happening here. Maybe it's a new set of opportunities to take a bigger part in, the world and material life. Or it may be a new job offer, for instance, or new things happening in regard to your job. But I tell you what it really is, Aquarius, is that it is a very good time to put not your bucket list, but to put it where your aims are. What are those aims? Where are you looking towards? You're here now, but where do you want to be? And what are your ultimate goals? And if you think about where you are and you think about your ultimate goals, can you get there from where you are? Well, if not, that new moon is saying it's time to throw out that rule book. Remember, we've got that Saturn-Uranus square there, and to have a whole different strategy so that you are on target to meet your really long-term goals. Finally, Pisces, the 9th house for you, and this has a lot to do with other countries, has a lot to do with distant horizons. So that can mean distant horizons in terms of time. And in as much as in the 10th house, we think about what are our long-term goals in the sense of, where do we want to end up? The 9th house is a sort of a little bit like that, in the sense that it's where are my greatest kind of, when I'm looking into the future, where is it that I see for myself? That's why we see it as travel as well, because when we get on a plane and travel to the other side of the earth, my goodness, do we get a new look at our lives in a new space? And I think maybe that's the message behind this new moon. It's looking at our lives from a new perspective. And of course, it may mean there are opportunities to travel and information and connections to people overseas. That new moon brings all that in. And of course, with Uranus in a surprising way. So that does take me through, and I know really how much all of you seem to like me to do this, but I feel also by showing you a horoscope and showing you everything else that amounts to, where the new moon, the full moon are situated and what's happening that plays into it, because as you can see, with these new moons, every new moon since August has had Uranus playing into it. Well, you get to see a different side of Uranus every time. So this sort of brings me to my conclusion. And often what's inspired my thoughts on this part of my video is what's happened during my week. And I had a client, a young woman, a very young woman, who had had an extremely difficult life. Really, I mean, I don't want to say what it was, because that might mean to point that person out, and I don't wish to do that. But let me tell you, extraordinarily difficult life, but fought through with sheer willpower and determination, and reached a point at which, well, at 22, as you'd imagine, the world was her oyster. But instead of feeling excited about this, she felt a certain amount of dread, because everything she looked at, she saw negatives. You know, even with all her abundant skills, there was every time she thought, oh, I want to do this with my life, then the negatives came up. Oh, I won't earn enough money with that, or that'll never work. No one ever gets very far. I mean, you know, if everybody thought that about the career they were going into, for instance, ballet is a very short career. So if you decided early on, oh, I'm not going into ballet because it's a short career, well, maybe the world has lost a great ballerina. So mostly we can't be limited by negatives. We really do have to, well, certainly where career is concerned, we have to go with our passions, because we'll stay the course if we're passionate about something. But this also led me on to something that I came across, you know, as I do, I read all the time. And I found this little fact out that the owner of Starbucks, the founder of Starbucks, had 217 rejections from investors before he found his first investor. Can you imagine that? 217 people saying, this is not a good idea. I'm sorry, you're not getting my money. And what goes with this idea is that you shouldn't allow rejection to inspire self-doubt. Never do that. Rejection is par for the course. It's something we have to learn about life. We will be rejected. There is nobody on this planet that hasn't been rejected. Or in the case of Mr. Starbucks, he's been rejected 217 times. So if you've been trying to get a job and you've had 217 rejections for that job or your CV, keep on going. It took 242, I think, before Starbucks was able to be funded. So you need that persistence. But I think what more is needed is that inner sense of who you are. And, you know, we're in charge of our dreams. Nobody makes our dreams come true. Nobody does it for us. We have to hold that dream inside and work steadfastly towards it. So yes, my little thought for this video is really don't let rejection become self-doubt. So everybody have a great week. As I said, don't forget to put some comments on my comment section and maybe subscribe, because, you know, the more who subscribe, the more Astrolutely and my YouTube channel can grow. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.